February 2nd, 1943, 04:17 a.m. The Wolf's Lair, East Prussia. The room is too warm. Maps cover the walls, thin red lines cutting deep into the Soviet Union, small black arrows pointing east, always east. A single green lamp hums above a radio operator's desk. The air smells of cigarette smoke and damp wool uniforms. And then it happens. The headphones crackle once, twice, and go dead. The operator adjusts the dial. Static. He tries again, fingers trembling now. Nothing. Across the room, Adolf Hitler stands motionless, hands clasped behind his back. His eyes do not leave the map of Stalingrad. A tight red circle surrounds the city like a wound that will not close. For weeks, reports from Friedrich Paulus's Sixth Army had grown shorter, ammunition critically low, rations reduced to frozen horse meat, wounded men freezing in cellars without morphine. But there had always been a signal. Until now. The radio operator swallows. Mein Führer, we are no longer receiving transmissions from Sixth Army headquarters. Silence fills the bunker. You can almost hear the ticking of the clock on the far wall. Outside, the February wind scrapes across frozen pine trees. Inside, the war shifts. Hundreds of miles away, in the shattered ruins of Stalingrad, the last German field radios lie half buried in snow and brick dust. Soviet artillery thunders in the distance, closer now. Red Army soldiers move street by street, cellar by cellar. Marshal Georgy Zhukov's encirclement has done its work. Operation Uranus. The pincer closed in November. Soviet tank armies smashed through thin Romanian lines north and south of the city. German panzer divisions, stretched too thin across the steppe, could not respond fast enough. Within days, more than 250,000 Axis troops were trapped inside a tightening ring of steel. Sixth Army was not supposed to be trapped. They were supposed to take Stalingrad. They were supposed to break the Volga. They were supposed to win. Back in East Prussia, Hitler's jaw tightens. For months, he had refused every suggestion of withdrawal. When Generaloberst Kurt Zeitzler pleaded for a breakout in December, Hitler overruled him. The Luftwaffe, Hermann Göring promised, could supply the pocket by air. It was a fantasy. Transport aircraft, Ju-52s and He-111 stripped of bombs, flew into blizzards and Soviet flak. Many never returned. The ones that did carried only a fraction of the daily 700 tons needed. Men froze waiting for bread that never came. Horses were slaughtered. Then dogs. Then nothing. Paulus had radioed that his ammunition was nearly exhausted. Soviet T-34s were punching through weakened defensive lines. Entire regiments were reduced to a few dozen frostbitten survivors. And yet, Hitler promoted Paulus to Field Marshal on January 30th, 1943. Why? Because no German Field Marshal had ever surrendered. The message was clear. Die but do not capitulate. Now the radios are silent. No final declaration. No triumphant last stand. No heroic death message. Just absence. In Berlin, Joseph Goebbels prepares the public narrative. Words like heroism and sacrifice are drafted, but in the Wolf's Lair the mood is different. This is not propaganda. This is arithmetic. An entire army gone. The Sixth Army had been one of Germany's finest formations. Veterans of France, veterans of Barbarossa, hardened officers, experienced NCOs, thousands of artillery pieces, hundreds of tanks. Destroyed. Captured. Vanished into Soviet captivity. You can almost feel the weight of it pressing down on that map-covered room. Hitler finally speaks. They will fight to the last man. But even as he says it, he knows. There is no more fighting. At 9:35 a.m. in Stalingrad, Paulus signs the surrender documents in a freezing basement. Soviet officers stand over him, expressions unreadable. Outside, Red Army soldiers shout in triumph. The Sixth Army ceases to exist. The red banner rises over the ruins. For the first time in the war, an entire German field army has been annihilated. And the myth of invincibility fractures. Back in East Prussia, reports begin to filter in through Soviet broadcasts. Prisoners taken, generals captured, tens of thousands marching into captivity. Hitler does not rage. He does not shout. He grows quiet. Very quiet. Because something has shifted. Stalingrad was not just a city. It was symbolic, named for Stalin himself. Taking it would have been a psychological dagger. Losing it is something else entirely. A signal to the world. A signal to Germany's enemies. A signal to his own generals. If Sixth Army can be destroyed, what else is vulnerable? For the first time since 1939, the initiative is no longer Germany. The Eastern Front, once a story of unstoppable advance, is about to become a grinding retreat. But Hitler is not yet ready to accept that. Not publicly, not even privately. Still in that bunker, staring at the silent radio set, he begins to understand. The war he started cannot be won the way he imagined. And worse, the Soviet Union has just proven it can destroy him. What he does next will decide whether this is merely a setback or the beginning of the end. The news does not reach the German public all at once. It seeps. February 3, 1943, Berlin. Snow falls softly over the Reich Chancellery. Civilians stand in ration lines, boots crunching against ice. Posters still promise victory in the East. Newspapers speak of heroic resistance and eternal sacrifice. But behind closed doors, the tone is different. Inside the propaganda ministry, Joseph Goebbels rehearses phrases that will soften catastrophe. He understands what Stalingrad means. This is not Dunkirk. This is not a temporary withdrawal. This is annihilation. In the high command, telephones ring without pause. Field reports from Army Group Don describe Soviet armor pushing westward. The Red Army is not exhausted. It is advancing. Maps are redrawn. Again. At the Wolf's Lair, Hitler gathers his senior commanders. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel, General Alfred Jodl. The room feels smaller now. They speak carefully. The Führer does not tolerate defeatism. Yet even he cannot deny the numbers. More than 90,000 German soldiers marched into Soviet captivity. Among them, 22 generals. Thousands lie frozen beneath the rubble of Stalingrad. The Luftwaffe has lost hundreds of aircraft in failed resupply missions. An entire strategic axis has collapsed. And worse, the Soviets have momentum. You can almost sense it spreading outward like a shockwave. From the Volga across the steppe, into every German-held position in southern Russia. Hitler steps closer to the map. His finger traces the line of Army Group South, Rostov, Kharkov, Kursk. He had believed the Soviet Union was a colossus with feet of clay. Barbarossa would crush it in months. Moscow would fall. Leningrad would starve. The Caucasus oil field would fuel the Reich for generations. But Stalingrad has exposed something he refused to see. The Red Army is learning. Under commanders like Georgy Zhukov and Alexander Vasilovsky, Soviet forces are coordinating armor, artillery, and infantry with increasing precision. Deep operations, encirclement tactics, maskirovka, deception on a massive scale. This is no longer the disorganized force of 1941. This is a machine, and it is growing stronger. Meanwhile, in a freezing prisoner column outside Stalingrad, Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus walks in silence. His promotion to field marshal had been meant as a final command to die. Instead, he surrendered. For Hitler, this is not merely military defeat, it is personal betrayal. Paulus did not shoot himself. He did not die in the ruins. He chose captivity. That choice lingers in Hitler's mind like a splinter. If a field marshal can surrender, what about others? What about morale? On February 18th, Goebbels stands before a packed Berlin Sportpalast. His voice rises. "Do you want total war?" The crowd roars back. Total war. The phrase is no longer abstract. It is survival. Factories expand production. Older men are drafted. Women fill industrial roles at unprecedented scale. The illusion of a short war is officially dead. Germany is now fighting for existence. And Hitler knows it. Yet even in crisis, his instincts harden. He forbids strategic withdrawal across much of the Eastern Front. No retreat without his direct order. Cities are to be held as fortresses. Ground is sacred. Generals exchange worried glances. They remember Stalingrad, the refusal to withdraw, the insistence on holding symbolic ground at any cost. And they wonder, will he repeat the mistake? Far to the west, in London and Washington, Allied intelligence intercepts confirm the scale of the disaster. Prime Minister Winston Churchill calls it the end of the beginning. President Franklin Roosevelt sees opportunity. If Germany can bleed like this in the East, perhaps a second front will finally be feasible. Stalingrad shifts calculations across the globe. Not just in Berlin. Everywhere. But inside Hitler's private quarters, late at night, the maps remain. The lights burn long past midnight. He studies them obsessively. Where did it unravel? Was it Paulus, Goering's failed airlift, the Romanian flanks, his own refusal to authorize breakout? He does not speak these doubts aloud. But they are there. Because beneath the outward defiance, something has cracked. The war is no longer a story of conquest. It is becoming a story of endurance. And Hitler understands one brutal truth. The Soviet Union will not collapse. It must be destroyed, or Germany will be. There is no middle ground now. No negotiated peace. No quick victory. Only escalation. And in that realization lies the seed of even greater catastrophe. Because the next gamble he takes will make Stalingrad look like a warning he chose to ignore. Spring 1943. The snow begins to melt across the Ukrainian steppe. Mud swallows boots and tank treads alike. Burned-out Panzer IVs sit half-sunken in thawing earth, black skeletons against gray skis. The Eastern Front exhales smoke and steam as both armies regroup. But beneath the thaw, something dangerous is forming. In Berlin, Adolf Hitler refuses to accept a defensive war. Stalingrad in his mind must be avenged, not endured. He speaks now not of consolidation but of restoration. The initiative must be seized back. And there on the map it appears. A bulge in the lines near the city of Kursk. After the Soviet winter offensives, German lines have bent westward, creating a massive salient that juts into occupied territory. It looks vulnerable, exposed, tempting. Hitler stares at it for long minutes. If he can pinch it off north and south, he could encircle entire Soviet armies, destroy them, reclaim momentum, prove Stalingrad was an aberration. He names it Operation Citadel. Field Marshal Erich von Manstein, recently successful in stabilizing Army Group South, advises speed. Strike before the Soviets can fortify. But Hitler hesitates. He wants new weapons. He wants superiority. He delays. Weeks pass. Then months. And in that time, the Red Army does not remain idle. Marshal Georgy Zhukov studies aerial reconnaissance photos with cold patience. He expects the blow at Kursk. The Germans have few other options. So he prepares. Soviet engineers dig thousands of miles of trenches, lay nearly 1,000,000 anti-tank mines, camouflage artillery positions, construct layered defensive belts stretching deep into the earth. Production surges beyond anything Germany can match. Entire factories east of the Urals operate day and night. You can almost hear the grinding of gears across the Soviet Union. They are ready. By July 5, 1943, the largest tank battle in history begins. North of Kursk, General Walter Model's Ninth Army advances cautiously through minefields under relentless artillery fire. South of the salient, General Hermann Hoth's 4th Panzer Army pushes forward with Tiger tanks and Panther tanks, new, formidable, but mechanically unreliable. The air vibrates with engine noise. Dust clouds blot out the horizon. Armor clashes at point-blank range near Prokhorovka in scenes of chaos that defy comprehension. Steel against steel. Fire against fire. And yet the German spearheads slow. Then stall. The minefields are deeper than expected. Soviet reserves counterattack with staggering force. Every kilometer gained costs hundreds of men and dozens of machines. This is not France in 1940. This is not the blitzkrieg of old. This is attrition. And Germany is losing it. Back at the Wolf's Lair, reports arrive hourly. Casualties mounting. Panther tanks breaking down before reaching the front. Soviet counteroffensives building strength. Hitler listens in silence. On July 10th, another blow lands, not from the east but from the west. Allied forces land in Sicily. A second front is opening. The war is closing in. Hitler makes his decision. Operation Citadel is cancelled. The gamble has failed. For the first time, the Wehrmacht is permanently on the defensive in the east. The Red Army seizes the initiative and never relinquishes it again. Kharkov falls, Smolensk falls, Kiev falls. The tide that began turning in the frozen ruins of Stalingrad now becomes unstoppable. And Hitler understands something he will never admit publicly. He cannot defeat the Soviet Union in a war of production. He cannot outnumber them. He cannot outlast them. Yet he refuses to change course. Instead, he doubles down. Orders no retreat, declares cities fortresses, sacrifices divisions to buy time that never truly materializes. Generals grow increasingly frustrated, but none dare openly challenge him. The memory of Stalingrad hangs over every discussion. What happens when withdrawal is forbidden? What happens when pride overrides strategy? Meanwhile, in Soviet POW camps, surviving soldiers of the 6th Army begin the long, brutal march into captivity. Starvation, disease, endless Siberian winters. Of the 90,000 captured at Stalingrad, only a fraction will ever return home. Their fate becomes a silent warning, not just to Germany's enemies, but to Germany's own commanders. By late 1943, the map Hitler once admired is shrinking. The red arrows now point west, closer to Poland, closer to the Reich itself. What began as disbelief at a silent radio in February has transformed into a strategic nightmare. Stalingrad was not merely a battle lost. It was the moment the war's direction reversed. And still, Hitler believes in one final twist of destiny. One final miracle weapon. One final stand. But history has already shifted. And the silence that began with 6th Army's last transmission is about to echo all the way to Berlin, January 16, 1945, 3:30 p.m. The Reich Chancellery, Berlin. The windows rattle. Not from artillery, From distant thunder. Soviet guns are still miles away, but everyone in the building knows what that sound means. The Red Army has crossed the Vistula. Marshal Zhukov's forces are advancing with terrifying speed. Maps are rushed into Hitler's underground bunker. The lines are collapsing. Again. But this time, there is no Volga between them, no vast Russian steppe to absorb the blow. This is Germany. And the silence that began at Stalingrad has finally come home. 2 years earlier, when the Sixth Army's radios went dead, Hitler had faced a choice: adjust or harden. He hardened. He dismissed generals who questioned him, replaced strategic flexibility with rigid command, declared cities Festungen, fortresses to be held to the last man. Warsaw, Budapest, Breslau. Each one became a miniature Stalingrad. Encircled, bombarded, destroyed. And each time, he believed endurance would break the Soviets. Instead, it broke Germany. Now, in 1945, the consequences are visible everywhere. Columns of refugees clog icy roads westward. Horse-drawn carts piled with blankets and children. Wehrmacht units retreat in disarray, exhausted teenagers in oversized uniforms clutching Panzerfausts. The myth of invincibility is long gone. The Wehrmacht that once blitzed across Europe is a shadow, outnumbered, outgunned, outproduced. Soviet T-34s roll forward in endless waves. You can almost hear the grinding tracks, almost feel the tremor beneath Berlin streets. In the Führer bunker, Hitler studies the map with the same intensity he once fixed upon Stalingrad. But something has changed in him. The energy is gone. The certainty is fractured. He issues orders for counterattacks by divisions that no longer exist. Commands Army Detachment Steiner to launch offensives with phantom strength. When informed the attack cannot proceed, he erupts not in fiery rage, but in something colder. Resignation. For the first time, he openly admits the war is lost. It is April 22, 1945. And in that dim concrete chamber, the realization that began in February 1943 finally becomes spoken truth. Outside, Soviet artillery begins to pound Berlin directly. Shells slam into government buildings. Fires rage through the Tiergarten. Civilians huddle in basements as Red Army units close in street by street. It feels eerily familiar. Urban combat. Encirclement. Desperation. Stalingrad reversed. The hunter has become the hunted. And what of Friedrich Paulus? After surrendering at Stalingrad, he survived captivity. Eventually, he would speak against the regime that demanded his death over surrender. His survival, once seen as dishonor in Hitler's eyes, becomes symbolic. He lived. Hitler will not. On April 30, 1945, in the bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery, Adolf Hitler ends his life. No grand battlefield death. No last charge. A pistol shot in a concrete room. The silence returns. When historians trace the arc of the Third Reich's fall, they often return to a single moment. Not D-Day. Not Berlin. But February 2, 1943. The day the Sixth Army went silent. Because that silence shattered something deeper than divisions and tanks. It shattered inevitability. Until Stalingrad, Germany's enemies feared its momentum. After Stalingrad, they believed in its defeat. And once belief shifts, wars follow. If you listen closely, you can almost hear it. The faint crackle of a radio in a frozen city, fading into static. That was the sound of an empire reaching its high-water mark. And then receding.